democracy, is that Xi's Achilles heel, is the question that we ask. Expansionist CCP remains the hashtag, the common thread through the course of the show today. Who is the platform? Engage with us on the handle at News18. Let's go across to our guests this evening, who have all heard, analyzed, and tried to make sense of Xi Jinping's speech, but more importantly, constitutional democracies across the world, and also that middle class, that group within China, which will talk and ask for freedom, for democracy. Is that the Achilles heel? Is that the way forward to ensure that this authoritarian juggernaut stops, and there is perhaps a little bit of a reset in the equations? Craig Singleton, adjunct fellow of at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, is with us. Dr. James Gomez, regional director, Asia Center, Bangkok-based think tank and member of the Singapore Democratic Party, is also with us this evening. We also have with us Dr. Shrikant Kondapalli, professor in Chinese studies at the JNU, China expert, and also Venus Upadhyaya, senior reporter, India and South Asia at the Epoch Times. Thank you very much. Pleasure speaking to all of you. Let me start with Craig. Craig, how would you see and view Xi Jinping's speech, and also are the next 15 years looking ominous? Is democracy going to be the only weapon that can be used against Xi Jinping and the CCP?
Thank you so much for having me. No doubt today's speech was bold, it was fiery, and it was highly choreographed. At its core, Xi's remarks were designed to hammer home the message that the party itself has saved China from poverty and from other humiliations in the past, and that the only continued way to prevent those sort of things from happening in the future is by having loyalty to the party and loyalty to Xi. That's how China is going to continue its economic development and its perceived global status. Few Chinese people may believe these ideas or even understand them, but few are foolish enough to question them. The simple fact is that the Chinese political system has been evolving for more than a century, since the fall of the last dynasty, and this process is not yet over. When and how the system will change is sort of impossible to predict. The only certainty, I think, is that repression alone cannot keep the Chinese people silent forever.
True, but the fact is that if that's what they're trying to say, Dr. Gomez, that this system, this model works. This model works. Forget individual rights of people, but if you want a country to be prosperous and if you want a country to be powerful, this is the model. Techno-authoritarianism.
Well, I think the model had worked quite well for a particular generation, coming out of the 1949, led by Mao Zedong, and also, all the developments after the Cultural Revolution. So since the late, 70s with Deng Xiaoping and the opening of the economic miracle, so to speak, you had really a hard-working, Chinese population that has been the powerhouse driving China's industrialization and economic growth. But I think the point to note here is that generation is now aging, partly also, in trying to manage the population with the one-child policy. So what we have to kind of put the spotlight now is those born in the 90s. Now, the generation that is about 30 years and a little bit younger, they have only known benefits, economic growth. They detest, the long hours at work. They are technologically savvy. Gone are the days also that, we get forward by being a member of the Communist Party. Young people now are indifferent. I've thought in China, I teach Chinese students, around the region in Southeast Asia. When you speak to them about, their interest in the Communist Party, they just shrug their shoulders. They know it's there. The parents constantly remind them that it'll be good for them to join the party and then use the party levers to get ahead. Right. But they're just not interested. So I think where we would see change would be the younger generation and the ones coming forward. And I think that is where the fissures are.
Well, that is something which even panelists earlier in the show said, that it is going to rise from within. When prosperity also brings the quest for freedom, Dr. Shrikant Kondapalli. But you think that is going to be the solution? Because I'm thinking from India's perspective. Can we afford, can we wait for 10, 15 years and for the CCP's machinations to work while hoping that internally there is a revolution that brews and democracy gets a shot in China?
Well, as far as the speech is concerned, it appears that there is the common theme of national rejuvenation and the continuation of the Communist Party's authoritarian rule. For the foreseeable future, they have maintained up to 2049 when they want to realize socialist modernization by this second centennial of the establishment of the People's Republic of China. So it appears from the Communist Party's point of view, there is no scope for introduction of democracy. However, over 800,000 villages in China, they have elections conducted regularly, and the presidents of the village are elected. However, the Communist Party is not based at the village, it is based at the county level. So they began also experiments related to elections at county level, but these are very minor, and these are basically to experiment with the democracy. So it is at the moment there is, as we see in the rest of the world, in democracies there is no one person, one vote. So 92 million people represent the 1.47 billion people as of now. However, there is a trigger here, one which is offered by the 400 million middle class. They have been asking for more powers, and 1982 constitution, China had 4 constitutions of the state. They have mentioned about several freedoms which are in the Indian constitution as well.
Right.
But there is a problem with the implementation of that. For instance, there are these freedom of speech, but the restrictions brought about by the Communist Party in terms of freedom of speech are all well known. So in terms of implementation, there is a problem. So the middle class were able to get the rights as far as the private property is concerned, but not in terms of the civil liberties and others that we think are part of the democracy. So this is the tension between the Communist Party and the middle class. So if you have seen the Alibaba chief Jack Ma's disappearance last October, they have now Tencent and other Alibaba, Ant Group and others were also kind of muzzled, and party branches are being pushed through. They actually have Communist Party cells in all the private enterprises or state-owned enterprises.
Right.
So what has happened is the intensification of this party hold. And so we don't see the prospect of democracy right now, despite some of the efforts and constitutional provisions.
True, but the fact is that should democracy be pushed, and can democracies both internally and externally, because that's what many are saying. Xi Jinping, his own admission is that the fall of the Soviet Union is what gives him nightmares, and the erstwhile Soviet Union is what gives him nightmares. So clearly he has a problem with the democratic setup. And we are seeing democratic voices being quelled. Venus, what's happened in Hong Kong with the last publication, which is a pro-democracy publication, being shut down, and China getting away with it. The Chinese authorities getting away with it, with what they've perpetrated on the citizens of Hong Kong, them reneging on all the promises they made to the Brits when this entire breakup happened after 99 years. Everything, they're just getting away with it. How is it that they're managing to do that?
First of all, I just want the audience to know that even the Epoch Times office was also attacked by the communist goons, and recently our reporters in Hong Kong have also been facing a lot of hard times. So yes, that's the reality. But I also want to talk about, I think this entire thing is the Chinese narrative. It's the communist narrative. It's about the communist agenda to, basically intimidate and to, ensure the communist struggle. It's a kind of a war that the communists are waging against rest of the world. I want to introduce to the audience this Epoch Times work. It's called The 9 Commentaries on the Chinese Communist Party. It's available online. It's by the editorial team of the Epoch Times. And this book is linked with another thing, which is called the Tuidang movement. So it's Tuidang. You can surf it and you can see the website. And you will see that there are over 370 million people, 370 crore people who have actually renounced the Chinese Communist Party, the various institutions of the Chinese Communist Party within China. So I think that kind of gives us another perspective as to, we can't say that nothing is happening. And for us to really do something about the Chinese Communist Party, we have to actually understand the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. And if you go through the 9 commentaries in the foreword, you will see that there is something in China, there is something called the party nature. And this party nature aims to basically eliminate and replace the human nature. So it's not just about democracy, it's not just about the universal values that rest of the world is adhering to. There is a certain agenda that the Communist Party has within China. There is an agenda that this Communist Party has for the rest of the world, and everything that is spoken, everything that is done, everything that is shown actually adheres to that. So I think for me, the Tuidang movement is actually a very good example, and I'm sure there are various such people's movements within China. We may not call them democratic movements. They may be very small scale movements. They may be in different forms, but there are voices within China which are talking against the Chinese Communist Party.
No, very well said. And if you're saying 370 million people have already given up the Chinese Communist Party within China, and you're saying, on the other hand, you have 92 million people representing 1.4 billion people, Craig, then there is a story here. And there is an opportunity for the world to amplify this and take it across and say, this is the reality in China, that there is a voice which is saying, and there are more voices which are against what is going on than actually backing this entire party nature aspect. Craig.
Look, the party can point to many achievements as it celebrates this really momentous event. It presides over the world's 2nd largest economy. It's soon to be the #1 if trends continue. It has an expanding high-tech military. It's the world's largest navy. Still, as I think guests have sort of acknowledged, the CCP is worried, and for good reason. There's an obvious tension between the self-interest of the party as the ruling party and its stated long-term goals for China. Surveys show that young urban Chinese, particularly educated Chinese, increasingly want more freedom, and they want a more responsive government. Nevertheless, I think it's really important to point out that China is not ripe for revolution. Its people do report high rates of satisfaction with their improving lives. They are not demanding Western-style human rights by and large. But what they're asking for is that China be more humane. And to remain in power, the Communist Party really must continue to enrich the Chinese people, which means that China needs to continue to import vast amounts of energy, food, and natural resources. It needs access to foreign markets, technology, and capital. The CCP, in other words, must integrate to survive. Which means that it either has to adapt to existing global norms and systems or alter them to suit Beijing's needs. And Xi is attempting to do both at once. He knows this, and that's why he's preparing China for this much more contentious era. But it's actually those deficiencies and those weaknesses in the party system and its structure, both overseas and domestically, that provide opportunities for democracies in the West to sort of push back against what we see going on inside of China, this repression, particularly against the Uyghur Muslim population. These are all vectors and opportunities where you can sort of expose the narrative and sort of make chinks in the narrative that Beijing has made, that its rise is inevitable, that everyone is content. There's a lot of opportunity space here. The biggest challenge facing democracies, though, is that a lot of democracies around the world are also going through sort of turbulent times. And whether those democracies can sort of band together demonstrate consensus and actually move on China in core areas, particularly as it relates to China's geoeconomic might, that is sort of the Achilles heel.
Absolutely, very well said. Can the democracies find themselves be stable enough and can stick together to take on and also capitalize on what are the internal faults within the CCP? That's the big challenge. Thank you to all our guests for joining us, and hope you enjoyed watching this very special edition